Yeah, it works.
Yeah.
No. Maybe.
Low network connected. Low connected.
We'll see. We'll see.
Low connected, maybe.
Why is it slow?
There's a foreign Wi-Fi. And the jump, the freezing, it's just so slow.
But it worked before.
Maybe I'm trying to another Wi-Fi, the password. Maybe quick.
Okay, Prabhu. Finish. We're trying to get the internet to work, and I can't guarantee we're going to stay online, but we'll do our best. And if I scream for the next few minutes because somebody's sticking a needle on my toe right now to draw blood because I have an infection. So, and I'm a Brahmin, not a Kshatriya, so Brahmins don't, Brahmins scream, Kshatriyas don't. So, I'm actually holding this, and I need to put it on another stand. So, how are we going to do this? Maybe I can sit at the table. Maybe I'll just hold it, but then my arm's going to get tired. So, we're in the middle of a crisis, and I have to make a quick decision. Okay. And nobody here speaks English. And I'm holding this in one hand, so I'm going to try to do something with my other hand to set up another stand. And then take this phone off and put it on the other stand. And you're probably going to see some walls for about a minute while I do that. Anyway, there's a devotee here that is massaging me. He's traveling with me. He's like so good. I feel like I'm a young man. And we just ended the massage. I didn't actually want to end it. So we weren't entirely ready, and I couldn't get online. And then the devotee who lives here figured out how we could broadcast. I was having trouble. So my whole setup I couldn't use because we had to use another router in another room. So I'm going to put you, I'm just going to, I don't know, have you stare at the ceiling or something because I have to take the phone off. And then you can just look at this my masseur getting something ready for me, and then I'm going to put this on the stand. And I don't have my normal setup. Okay, yeah, I don't have my normal setup, my normal microphone. Everything's in the other room. So we'll just go with this. Just give me a second. Make it a little higher. Yes. So, yeah. I think we've kind of finished the series on self-esteem. If I go any further, it's going to go out of the realm of Krishna consciousness into the realm of pure psychology and self-help, which would only be necessary, I think, for certain devotees, and if their situation is that critical, probably they need professional help. So I was thinking of going to another topic, but I haven't chosen the other topic. And during the massage, I was listening to some morning walks, and I thought we could discuss that. Unless you have some questions, or you want me to cover a particular topic, but I think I think we did 25 lectures or 24 lectures on the topic of self-envy, self-esteem. And, it really requires a reprogramming of one's core beliefs if one feels themselves kind of useless, worthless, can't do anything right, nobody likes me, so that was the ultimate conclusion we came to. It requires a reprogramming. And at the same time, in studying what Prabhupada teaches, and Krishna consciousness is the solution. So, in that sense, if one is well situated in the mode of goodness, one is happy and blissful. And so that's the pure Krishna conscious way of overcoming low self-esteem. But sometimes it's so deeply rooted that it actually prevents devotees from accessing the mode of goodness or accessing it for a very long period of time, because Prabhupada said when you're in the mode of goodness, purely you're not touched by passion and ignorance. If you're not touched by passion and ignorance, then all that ignorance that is making us feel so bad about ourselves wouldn't affect us. But the paradox is that when we're in that consciousness, it's hard to get to goodness. So it's like a catch-22. If you could get to goodness purely, it would solve the problem. But if we have the problem, it's so much connected to ignorance that it's hard to get out. And on the morning walk, a question was asked about being controlled by the modes of nature, because Prabhupada is always saying we have choice, and at the same time it doesn't seem like we have choice, it seems like we're controlled by the modes of nature. Excuse me, I'll move this for a second. And there's probably going to be a lot of background noise, cooking and talking and so forth. So I'll try to get a little closer. So Prabhupada gave an example which I thought was very appropriate to this question. If the modes of nature control us, but we have free will, then how is it that, who's controlling what? So Prabhupada said, you have free will. As a citizen, you have free will to follow the law or not. But if you don't follow the law, you'll be put in prison. And then you have to follow, by force, the laws of the prison. Or if you stay out of the prison, you have free choice. The prison would be compared to the modes of nature, particularly lower modes, or in this case, mode of ignorance, which generally is predominating in those who have low self-esteem. So we have a choice of how we want to see ourselves, how we want to see others. We have a choice of how we want to believe, the attitudes we have, and how we want to serve or not serve, or how we want to control ourselves or not. And according to how we use that choice, then we'll fall under the influence of the modes of nature. And then when we fall under the influence of modes of nature, it becomes more difficult to make that choice because we're being pushed around. And the most difficult place to make that choice is from the mode of ignorance, because in the mode of ignorance we have the least amount of free will. I mean, we always have free will. But to be able to access our free will in the mode of ignorance is much more difficult, because there's more inertia working against us. So that's why sometimes when people are dealing with low self-esteem, which is symptomatic of the mode of ignorance, and we say, Krishna consciousness is the solution, but they can't access that solution well enough because they're dominated by ignorance. So in that case, that's when somebody would really need it. Maybe some deeper help, which could work them through to a point where they could exhibit their free will more strongly and make better choices and start to reprogram the way they see themselves. And that, if someone's dominated by ignorance, that generally would require help, because of that ignorance, their Krishna consciousness is sometimes not very strong. At least that's what I've seen. I've seen some devotees in particular areas of their life very much dominated by programming You could say self-destructive kind of programming. They just work against themselves. It's their default consciousness. So when they're in Krishna consciousness, when they're chanting, when they're kirtan in class, association, they transcend that. But if that conditioning is very strong, they tend to fall back into it. Now, we all have that experience, so it's all a question of what we fall back into. So as you advance in Krishna consciousness, when you fall back into whatever it is you fall back into it, if you're more Krishna conscious, you fall back into more Krishna consciousness. And if you're less Krishna conscious, you fall back into more Rajagun or Tamagun. So that's the nice thing about becoming Krishna conscious, because when you fall into Krishna consciousness. But when we're dominated by ignorance, then when we're not in good association, we're not in kirtans, we're not chanting good rounds, we're not reading, then we kind of go back to our default position, and whatever that default position is, that will start to dominate. And if too much ignorance dominates, then it debilitates our ability to do good sadhana, and the good sadhana is what would get us out of the ignorance. And so sometimes that ignorance is like glue, it's attached to us. And so in those cases, devotees would need special help to deal with it, to start reframing attitudes and beliefs about how they see themselves and others. And we've talked about this before. This is kind of interesting because a lot of what we would describe as demoniac qualities of materialistic people, manifest in people who are not any less spiritually advanced than other devotees, but they have more emotional or psychological problems, and therefore there can be envy or jealousy because they feel others are better than them, and it makes them feel bad, not because necessarily they're envious people, but they have low self-esteem, and that's a symptom of low self-esteem. So that's all interesting. It's kind of like a social analysis of the source of problems. I was, for example, preaching in certain parts of the world, and there's certain cultural tendencies in the people in that part of the world. And in some parts of the world, there's more aggressive cultural tendencies, or more critical cultural tendencies, or more abrasive cultural tendencies. And even you find this quite common, that even after devotees evolve in their Krishna consciousness, they still have those tendencies. And so when I would look at that and analyze that, I'd have to ask myself the question that these are nice devotees and they're advanced, but I see tendencies in them that are not indicative of advanced devotees. They're more indicative of materialistic people. And I'd have to ask myself, are these really the qualities that I'm seeing? And I came to the conclusion that although externally it seems like they're abrasive or angry or hateful or spiteful or envious or jealous, it's actually more of a cultural conditioning than a spiritual defect. So it could be a cultural conditioning, or it could be an emotional problem, which then manifests, which we would call demoniac qualities, but in a sense, they're not really demoniac because the source is not demoniac. Isn't that interesting? I mean, this is something I dealt with for years, and I was trying to figure out. These are advanced devotees, and they're very dedicated, and they're very nice if you deal with them one-on-one. But the culture has a certain tendency for people to exhibit these, what we would say to be demoniac qualities, and I have to ask myself, are they really demoniac qualities? Is this really what I see? Are they genuine, or is it a cultural phenomena in which that's just normal for them? That's how they're conditioned to act. Not that it's good. I'm not justifying it, but I don't see it necessarily as a spiritual defect. I see it as a cultural conditioning or an emotional weakness. So I think that's important to understand. But the reality is, if, let's say, I'm critical or offensive to devotees, the reality is I'm critical and offensive, whatever the cause may be. And if the cause may be, well, everyone in my city is like that. Everybody's sarcastic. Everybody puts everyone down. I've been doing it since I'm 5 years old. Okay, we understand that's why you're doing it. Maybe it's not that you're Duryodhana and have that tendency like he does. But the fact is you're doing it. And because you're doing it, it's having a detrimental effect on your Krishna consciousness. So we might say, well, do more Krishna conscious activities to overcome it. But sometimes because it's culturally conditioned or emotionally conditioned, that won't always work. You'll actually have to go in and understand the cultural or conditioning or the psychological problem and deal with it on that level. Sometimes, although some people, through advanced Krishna consciousness, can do it and solve it that way. But as I said, when you're dealing with some of these problems, which are connected with lower modes of nature, it debilitates your ability to be always situated in Krishna consciousness, or to be well situated in Krishna consciousness. And therefore your practice of Krishna consciousness, and you've probably seen this, although you might be advancing in some ways, in other ways you don't seem to be advancing. You'll see that in yourself or other people and say, how is it that after all these years, he's still like this? He doesn't get along with anybody. And he chants 32 rounds a day. He's read the Bhagavatam 20 times. He's a great scholar. He does amazing service, and he can't get along with anybody. We've all seen that. And so that, you'd think, well, after all that Krishna consciousness, that would work. But he's conditioned in a certain way. He's always been that way. And right now, when I'm talking, I'm actually thinking about people I know. And I've known them for 35 years. And they're still the same as they were 35 years ago in that aspect. But in other aspects, they're very advanced. So my understanding, realization is those people would have to work on that particular defect they have, which was conditioned by their family, their culture, their own psychology, their own weakness. That Krishna consciousness doesn't seem to be helping. Some, aspect of the mode of ignorance or passion that they can't get rid of. So Prabhupada said, if you're purely situated in Sattva Gun, then you won't be influenced by Rajagun and Tamagun. But it seems in many cases people, because of their emotional state or their cultural conditioning, can't be well situated in Sattva Gun even though they have good sadhana, because there's this other side that they need to deal with. So I think that's important to understand. Because, as I said, if we don't get along with devotees, or if we're offensive, or if we're extremely belligerent, or arrogant, or lazy, or critical, whatever it is, because that's just the way everybody is in our family, or city, or school, or culture, it's still going to affect you, because that is connecting you with the mode of ignorance. So that's something to consider, I think. Yes? Does that make sense? So that was my conclusion when, all these lectures are on SoundCloud, if you listen to them, and after listening to all of them, you still have issues, whatever those issues may be, regarding your lack of caring for yourself, or your lack of sense of that you're a good person or you're a capable person, that still dominates you after listening. We've probably done like 40 hours. So then my conclusion, my understanding is there's deeply rooted, deeply seated problems or deeply seated beliefs, deeply seated conditioning that you have to isolate and go and deal with and change. Because if you ever try to change something, or change the way you think, or change the way you act, and you keep defaulting to your old behavior, most likely, if not 100% of the time, it's because you have beliefs which are antagonistic to what you're trying to do. So let's say we use self-esteem as an example. Let's say someone feels like everything I do, why should I do anything? Because I can't, everything I do is just going to fail. So that's a belief. So then I talk to them and I say, you should be positive, you should find something that inspires you. I don't think you are incapable of achieving success. And I get him looking at things in a different way, looking at himself in a different way. I don't think the way you see yourself is actually real. I see you're intelligent, I see you're capable. Have you ever done anything good, successful? Well, I did this or that. Well, that shows you could be successful. That shows what you believe is not what's actually happening. And the person's thinking, yeah, that's right. So I'd say, well, what would be a better belief? And I'd say, well, a better belief would be that, I can be successful. I'm not useless. So, I leave, right? And then 3 days later, he gives up. Why does he give up? Because he still has that belief that I'm going to fail. It's so deeply wired or deeply ingrained. So when you're in a situation like that where you're trying to change, you've listened to all these lectures and you still have a very negative attitude toward yourself, or this attitude, I just don't care, then you have a belief that's dominating, and that belief becomes your default. And although you're trying to change in so many ways, unless you change your belief, you default back to the same way of thinking. Like, a lot of men might think they're not good husbands, or maybe a lot of wives think they're not good wives, or parents might think, I could never really be a good parent, or you have a service and you might think, I can never really be good at this. That if you want to be good, you want to be a good parent, or husband, or wife, or improve your service, then you have to be able to overcome that belief. You have to be able to see beyond that. You have to be able to see beyond your limitations, that you could be better. And so if you change your belief, your understanding that you could be better, you'll do better. That's just the way it works. But many people are stuck. No, I know I can't. I've tried. It doesn't work. So that's why, if you think that way, that's why you could hear classes, you could get encouraged, inspired, you could even work with counselors and mentors, but nothing happens because you default back to that consciousness, that attitude, that belief, which is basically antagonistic to what you're trying to achieve. The unfortunate reality of this is that if, let's say in this example, you believe that you can't be successful, what happens is you won't be successful. And then that becomes confirmation of your belief. See, I told you I can't be successful. Just see, you inspired me, but nothing happened. Because the belief didn't change, and therefore the result didn't change. And because the result didn't change, convinces you of what you believe. But it only happened because you believe it. So you have to understand the cycle, how it works. And if it happens because you believe it, then if you change what you believe, something else would happen. But if you don't change it, you won't get the new result, and then you won't be able to believe that now you are a better person or more capable than you thought you were. Because you never embody that belief enough to be able to do something that would convince you that you're more capable than you think you are. So it's a vicious cycle. So now we have a comment. Jivana says, what if you can't see your fault? And my joke is, get married. And you'll have someone who'll tell you all your faults. You don't have to ask, they'll tell you, believe me. They'll tell you. They'll even tell you about faults you don't have. That's the way it is. So, but what you can do, that was funny, you can laugh. Some smiles there, Give me some credit. But what you can do is, you can ask somebody. Say, I want to be more introspective about my faults. Can you give me some feedback? That's one thing you can do if you're brave enough to do it. But thank you for laughing. I guess If you're not American, maybe you don't understand when something's funny. That's part of the problem of preaching internationally on Facebook. Not everyone will understand your jokes. Or maybe that wasn't funny. Or maybe I offended somebody. If I offended anyone, please forgive me. That was a joke. So, but I would say, another way to answer this question is, saying if you can't see your own problems, that's a problem that you should be dealing with. You know what I'm saying? So what if you can't see your problem? Well, that's a problem. Because if we're in a consciousness where we can't see our own problem, that's not a good consciousness to be in. And part of the problem with that, which is quite common, is if you're having difficulty seeing your own problems, there's a good chance you're not having difficulty seeing other people's problems, which is why you're not seeing your problems. Yeah. Okay. Does that make sense? Jivanam, does that make sense? But, there's things you can do. You can ask devotees, can you help me? Or if you have a counselor, you can help me see where I need to improve, or ask your spiritual master. But I would say that the problem, that you can't see the problem, is something you should be willing to work on. And I tend to think you can see the problem. I tend to think the problem is you don't want to admit that you can see it. Like there's a saying, what are you pretending not to know? So it's like you know it, but somehow you're pretending you don't know it. In a lot of the japa workshops or retreats, I ask a question. I said, what can you do to improve your japa? Just write down 3 things in 10 seconds. Just top of your head. So everybody knows things they can do. I'm not getting up early enough. I'm not concentrating when I chant. Or aware, right? So they write it down. And the interesting thing about it is, it was so easy to come up with that. And then I said, well, if it was so easy to come up with that, why did you have to ask me to get you to write it down? Why didn't you just write it down knowing this is a problem? Because to admit our problems, to face them, it's not natural for all of us. Isn't it? So then I said to them, I don't think the biggest problem is you're not doing what you just wrote down you should be doing, or avoiding what you should be avoiding. I think the bigger problem is that you already knew that, and you didn't really need me to ask you, and that's the problem, that I had to come in to ask you when you should have been asking yourself. So then I would say, well, why, if you knew these things, why didn't you do anything? And a lot of devotees realize that, well, it's going to be difficult to do it, so I'd either kind of pretend that I don't know it, or I know it, but I don't want to think about it. Because if I think about it, what if I don't do it? So better not think about it. Or why should I notice what's wrong with me? Because I know on some level I'm not going to do anything. So better not admit that I have a problem. Right? So you can consider if that's part of the reason you can't see your fault. Because if you did see it, you'd have to do something about it. Or a corollary to that is, if you did see it, your false ego would be unhappy. It would be quite bruised. And so maybe it's too sensitive for your false ego to see what's wrong. Or maybe if you see what's wrong, it'll make you feel bad, and you don't want to feel bad. It will depress you. So in some way, you just don't admit you have these qualities or these faults. And that way, you don't feel bad, you don't have to do anything. And what to speak, that you realize the problem and then you don't do anything, that makes you feel really bad. So why even bother with it? I'll just pretend I don't really know what's wrong. So that could be one of the reasons. Okay, so now, Pandora Henson. she says she has a problem, which is she doesn't think she can become a real devotee until after I retire. So, I would say it's definitely true that when you retire, because you could fully engage in devotional service, you'll be more Krishna conscious. But to say that you can't become a real devotee, you can't become Krishna conscious until after you retire, it's not true. And I can prove it to you. Vrindavan, I can prove it to you. So, and anybody can use this, and it's just such a good exercise. If you say, I don't believe I can do this or that, and I would say, I didn't come up with this, someone else did, but it's really good. Would you bet your life savings, assuming you have life savings, and if you don't have any savings, assume you do, would you bet your life savings on that statement? And so we'll use this statement. She said, I can't become a real devotee. She meant, I can't become a real devotee until after I retire. So the assumption is, I'll become a real devotee. By real devotee means, like a standard. I don't think she means like a pure devotee. Like a standard, like fully, engaged, Krishna conscious, not getting angry and frustrated and depressed and like that. I think that's what she means because I know her and we've talked about this. So it's something like that, right? I'm at work and I get frustrated and angry and I come home exhausted and I don't want to chant, that kind of thing. So that's what she's saying. It said, I don't think until I retire I can overcome that. So then we ask the question, would you bet your life savings on that you can't become Krishna conscious until you retire? Now you have to think, would I actually bet my life savings on it? Which is another way of saying, is this statement entirely true? So that'll get you thinking. And then you probably would say, no, I don't think I would bet my life savings on it because it might not be entirely true. And obviously it's not entirely true, but it's only true to the degree that you think it's true. Or you make it true by believing it. So, does that help? It's a thought, or any of you could, I don't believe I could become Krishna conscious. I don't think it's possible for me to become Krishna conscious this lifetime. Okay, would you bet your life savings on that? Is that statement 100% true? Without fail, for sure. You probably think, well, I'll probably live another 40 years, so, anything could happen in 40 years. Exactly. Anything could happen tomorrow. You see what I'm saying? So you have to, you want to question your own assumptions. You want to question your own beliefs. And if you do, most likely you wouldn't bet your life savings on a lot of them. I mean, the positive beliefs, the beliefs that are helping you, yeah, that's great. So we have some questions or discussions. What should be our basis of communication? Spiritual material so that it isn't misunderstood. I'm not sure what you mean. Excuse me. I just had this great massage, and after the massage, when I sit down, it must be my posture or something, everything just starts tightening up that was loose before. So I have to keep moving. Basis of our communication, be it spiritual material. Well, if you're with a devotee, generally with a devotee, communication is about Krishna consciousness. And so, why don't you give me an example of a communication that could be misunderstood? Because I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. I don't want to answer the question that you didn't ask. So let me wait for you to restate it. The basis of our communication, so that it's not, maybe I understand the question. You're saying, if I'm communicating, let's say you and I are communicating, whether it's about Krishna consciousness or just something we have to accomplish. It's practical stuff. So it's not misunderstood. I can better speak from your perspective of hearing communication. Don't make assumptions about what a person's saying. That's a big problem. Don't project your own insecurities into what they're saying. You know, and I think when you make assumptions, you're also projecting your world into what they're saying, you know. So I tell you, I say something, and you get upset about something I didn't say. Because what I said triggered assumptions about what I meant, which was nothing in the words I said. You came up with a whole new meaning about my intention, which you read into, which was just an insecurity on your part, that you felt that I was putting you down because you're insecure about yourself, and you know, and so I didn't put you down. There's nothing I said to put you down. Well, let's give an example. Yesterday you did something, and I said, I just wanted to point out that in Krishna consciousness we don't do it that way. I understand that maybe in your home you do it this way, but in the temple we do it this way for this reason or that reason. So I just wanted you to know that this is the proper way. Now your insecurities and assumptions come up. Oh, so you're saying something's wrong with me. Or you're saying I'm stupid, right? You're saying like I'm not, you're saying I don't know, I'm not Krishna conscious. You're saying I don't know how to be a devotee. No, I didn't say any of that. I just said, this is how we cook this, or this is how we do this. Oh, you don't like me, that's why. Why are you picking on me? Why don't you tell somebody else? Why am I the only one? No, you're not the only one. You see what I mean? So a lot of the misunderstandings in communication are results of people's own insecurities. You know, I thought we were friends. How could you talk to me like that? Because I'm trying to help you. Because if you make the same mistake again, they'll probably ask you never to do that service. You assume that I didn't like you. Oh, well, you don't like me? Or you're trying to show that you're better than me? No, not at all. I'm just trying to help you. So, our own view of the world, our own securities, our own assumptions based on our reality that another person speaks, they didn't say any of that. You made all these assumptions, now you're firing back and getting upset. We're thinking, what happened? Like, all I said is, don't do it this way. Don't put it here, put it there. Don't wash it with this rag, wash it with that rag. Don't use this broom, that's for the outside, use this for the inside. That's all I said. There's just a standard here. You know, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that, where you're just explaining something extremely simple to someone. It's ABC, and it's like this, and they blow up at you. Making assumptions. Miscommunication because you have expectations. Well, you know, you're my counselor, you're my mentor. I didn't expect you to tell me, you know, that I was using the wrong rag. That's not what counselors do. Counselors just explain the philosophy and call me up, you know, every day to make sure I channel my rounds. They don't tell me, you know, what rag goes where in the pujari room. Who said they don't? You know, that's your expectation, or your assumption also. So you have all these expectations of how a person is supposed to do things, and they didn't do it that way, but what they did was perfectly fine, and you're in a different universe. Other problem with communications from your side is that you don't agree with what a person said. And part of the time we don't agree is just because we don't understand. So we think they're wrong. We may be wrong. We may not understand, but we think they're wrong. So we either tell them you're wrong, or we don't agree, because we don't have the same experience or knowledge or attitude they have. So they see things differently. So another bad form of the communication is to invalidate people's feelings as unimportant, or just to invalidate the person, for having feelings. Of course, some people feel some pretty crazy things, but you don't have to agree with their feelings. But their feelings may not be accurate. They may feel something that's not true. I mean, you could discuss that. But to invalidate the fact that they're human beings with feelings can destroy communication. Not caring about what people say can destroy communication. Now, then you probably want to know, well, what's the answer from my side? Well, if you're communicating to someone who has all the faults that I just explained, and you have no idea they have those faults, it's going to be trouble. It's going to be difficult. But then, at least when you see their response, where you were like totally reasonable and practical, and they were totally unreasonable, then you're going to have to realize, oh, they're making assumptions, or have expectations, or they have issues. That what I said, was sensitive for them. It's what I call the black and blue sentence. The black and blue sentence is you say something like, oh, we're late, we have to go. And the black and blue means someone has a black and blue mark because they were hurt. And so the black and blue mark is so sensitive that if you just tapped it with a feather, they would scream. So you said, we have to go, we're late, and then they blow up at you. Whoa. And you have no idea what you did. So then you can go back and understand, okay, there's something going on with this person. They've got some issue about something. And what you said was the feather on the black and blue mark. You didn't say anything wrong, but they have a black and blue mark. So now you know, maybe you have to learn how to communicate. Now, different people have, they want communication in different ways. And as you know, as women, you like to talk. And sometimes you just want to talk, and you actually don't want anybody to say anything. You just want people to say, okay, I understand. Even if what you said tomorrow you'll totally take back as stupid and crazy, you don't know why you said it. But in that moment, you don't want anybody to say that's stupid and crazy. You just want them to say, okay, I understand. So part of listening, which is very challenging, is to just be able to hear that. To hear something from somebody that makes absolutely no sense and not react in any kind of negative way. Understanding that that's just that person's, that's what they needed to communicate that. They needed you to understand how they're feeling, even though you understand that what they're feeling it's going to change in a couple of days, because it has nothing to do with the way the world is. It only has to do with the way their world is. So, anyway, I guess you could flip it around and don't communicate, don't be someone who has the expectations and assumptions and so forth when you communicate. So that's, I don't know if that's an exhaustive answer to your question, but it's a start. Now, one person said something which I don't follow, probably would be good if I did, and I think it's good for managers also. So when you say something, say, could you tell me what I just said? I just want to see if you understood what I said. So if you're afraid someone doesn't understand, I don't know how you want to ask them and say, so this is what we need to do, or this is how I'm feeling, or this is my point. Do you understand? Could you just explain to me what I said? Because I need you to I want to know if you actually understood what I said. No, it's good you said that, because that's not what I said, it's not what I meant. Of course, you can't really do that in email, because you're not live, so they just misunderstand, and send you back an email which is like, whoa, what happened? And I think, for deep, meaningful communication, maybe email's not the greatest. But anyway, those are some thoughts. Sometimes people like to communicate an email because they can think, or as they talk, they're going to yell and scream and say something they'll later have to regret that they can't take back. And they're going to say, I didn't mean it. To which many people will say, if you didn't mean it, you wouldn't have said it. Sorry, you said it. You must have meant it to some degree. And that's how I feel, and people have, well, not people, but some people I'm very close to have told me if I've said something mean, and I said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, I was just agitated. And say, no, you mean it. You wouldn't have said it. So it's hard to get back something you said because you actually said it, and you're going to try to say, no, but that's not what I said, it's not what I mean. That may be true, but you did say it. So some people prefer email because that way they can think about it. Whereas if you're like texting on WhatsApp or Facebook, and just spontaneously in the moment you say something which you said, which you're going to try the next day to say, no, it's not actually what I said. No, you did. It's right here. No, but that's not what I mean. Well, that when people say that, that's what they mean. How could you not mean what you just said? No, I was just feeling this and that. I know what you were feeling. You explained it in what you said. So now you realize that you actually didn't mean what you said, but you were just responding emotionally. And so, you have to be careful when you speak to say what you mean, because once you say it, it does its damage, even if you don't mean it. So, any heated discussion you're having, sometimes it's better not to say anything, or any heated email you're writing. Sometimes it's better to write it and don't send it and read it the next morning if it's an emotional issue, and then edit it out. One of the things that I found, I was managing, a couple of years I was managing, and when you're managing, there's a lot of heated discussion that goes on. And Krsna inspired me to not send emails in the heat of the moment. And then when I would go back the next morning, when I was a little more calm and distanced from the situation, I'd read the email. My basic edits were to take out all the adverbs and adjectives. What you did was extremely, violently, extravagantly wrong. All right, just take out those three. What you did was wrong. So because when you're disturbed, that's when all the adjectives come in. And then it's like over the top, and it's hurtful, and it's not necessary. So that's a thought, which is harder to do when you're talking to somebody, especially if you feel they misunderstand you, and you have a need to be understood. And I think some of us have a very strong need to be understood, and some of us cannot be understood because we're crazy. And nobody's going to understand us, and we're always going to be frustrated because we say things that don't make sense. One person says something, and the crazy person, which we're all a little bit, responds in a way that makes no sense. And they have a deep-rooted need to be understood, and nobody can understand. Why did you say that? It doesn't make any sense. No, you don't understand me. You think I'm crazy. I'm not crazy. It's just you just don't understand. Okay. So now what do we do? So sometimes, if we're dealing with people, or you're one of them, that need to be understood, try to speak in coherent ways, ways that people with common sense will understand, that are not filled with emotion, and are kind of accurate according to the way the reality of the world is. And people are, because if you say things that aren't, you're going to be misunderstood by most people who don't know that when you say this, you don't mean it. Right? Well, so until you educate people that when you say, I'm going left, I really mean I'm going right, you're probably going to be misunderstood. And so a lot of people do that, and they say, no, but that's not what I meant. They say, well, how am I supposed to know you didn't mean this when this is what you said? I don't want to do this because of this and that, and I don't appreciate when you're doing this and that. Okay, I read it. That's pretty clear. No, that's not what I meant. I didn't say that. No, you did. No, but that's not what I said. No, it is what those are what the words mean in English. You did say it. No, I didn't mean that. So there's a saying, say what you mean and mean what you say. And there's another saying, what is it? Put your mind in order before you put your mouth in order, something like that. So these are things to consider. I mean, this is a whole discussion, communication, but yeah. Anyway, those are my spontaneous responses. All right. So we have a question from Shama Saha, with Shama. Could it be possible that at times our conditioning and personality misleads us to believe that our faults are acceptable, unless it takes us longer to acknowledge and rectify? Yeah. I think it also goes back to culture and association. Because if you're associating with people who have the same faults, then how would you know that they're faults if everyone's doing it? And that's the way that's the way morals degrade, because with each decade morals degrade, and that becomes normal. So like 50 years ago, well, let's say 100 years ago, if you were frozen 100 years ago and thawed out now and saw what was going on, you'd have a heart attack. You couldn't believe that leaders and teachers and respectable people in society have just said what they said and did what they did, because 100 years ago, if you said that, you'd be arrested. Literally, I'm not joking. This is true. So that can be a problem if in your culture or in your environment people are a certain way and they exhibit qualities which we as Vaishnavas would not appreciate, but you don't really notice it because that's how you've always been and how they've always been. That's why we need better association. And that's why also sometimes devotees find it really valuable to travel to a different country and see ISKCON in a different country. Go to India, of course. I was just with a householder couple, and I was saying, I think it'd really be good if you stayed with another householder couple, because you have a certain culture in your house and you have a certain way of dealing with one another. I think it would really be healthy for you to get a different view on different ways that other couples deal with one another. And because I don't know if you see that it's possible to deal any way with one another. And you say, well, that's the way my mother dealt with my father, that's the way my father dealt with my mother. Yeah, so that's the point. That's all you've seen, so that's normal. In some families, what's normal is abnormal in another family. Right? So until you go in that other family and say, in this family, they don't do this. That's very interesting. I thought everybody did it. Then you realize, maybe what I'm doing isn't right. So that's another suggestion. So that's a good point. Jita says, how to overcome such problem of self-deceiving and turning a blind eye to our own faults, even if we know they exist. It's like saying you cannot wake up a person who pretends to be asleep. You can't. The only answer to your question is you have to want to see it. You have to, at some point, understand that you can't heal without confronting your problems. And when you understand that, then you're ready to deal with it. Tomorrow? Tomorrow, like 7 o'clock? 1 second. 7 tomorrow?
Evening?
7?
Or morning?
Evening.
Oh, evening, okay.
7?
晚上7点过来.
More or less. Yeah. This is a universal answer I've given to many questions, that you won't develop something until you want to. So, if you really don't want to see yourself, you're not going to. But at least understand the problem's not going to go away by avoiding it. You're going to have to deal with it. So hopefully understanding that can give you the strength to confront it. Okay? A motivator is dangerous, yeah, because you motivate people to do the wrong. If they're going in the wrong direction, you don't want to motivate them. Yeah. Are you a motivational speaker? No way. People are going to hell. I don't want to motivate them to get there faster. Every motivational speaker is getting people faster to the wrong place, at least from a spiritual perspective. Materially, no, maybe the right place, but spiritually, most of them are not helpful. Okay, so I have to eat something because I have to take some medicine. We went to the Chinese doctor, and he gave us 8 packets of herbs that we have to boil twice a day. That's the medicine I take. And human life is meant for austerity, and these herbs are very austere. They're very bitter, and I'm doing austerity. But I have to eat, and it's late, and I have some rounds left. So I'm going to have to bid you goodbye. Tomorrow, we're having class, which will start 2 hours and 45 minutes before this class started. I can only give you the time here. It's 5:15 here in China. So you can calculate that. And that's for the devotees in Australia. It suits their time frame. And then anyone else who wants to attend, provided the internet works. And so we got it working now, but doesn't mean it's going to work then. I think bitter medicine, Chinese medicine, bitter. But I think it's working. It's actually, we found the problem, because everybody wants to know about my health, but one of the problems we found, which I knew was a problem, is I wasn't sleeping well. So a lot of times, you look at me and go, God, you look so tired. You should sleep more. And I said, I got enough sleep, but it wasn't good sleep, so I was tired. So he felt my pulse, this and that, and he said, do you sleep well? And I said, no, I have wrestling matches every night with my pillows. I beat up my pillows. And he said, okay, we'll give you these medicines. So he gave me like 3 medicines, the bitter herbs and 2 others, capsules, to help me sleep. It's actually helping me sleep, and I'm not tired. I don't know if you noticed, but that I looked more tired last week or the week before, but I'm not tired because I'm sleeping better. So that's good news, isn't it? And it's like 9:15 at night here, and I'm not tired. So I guess the medicine's working. Okay, and the devotees here that I'm staying with have been very kind to me. And as you may or may not know, my iPad mystically disappeared. I can't figure out. It merged into Brahman, and the airlines couldn't find it. I don't know what happened. It fell in my bag in somebody's lap. No idea. It fell in a trash can. We can't find it. They gave up looking. And the devotees here bought me a new tablet. So if you were concerned about my tablet, that's what I read on the airplane. This is where I have all my books and Prabhupada's books. So that problem is solved. And we booked my ticket to Mayapur, so I arrived in Calcutta 10 o'clock on December 18th. Anyone who's going to be in Mayapur between the 18th of December and around the 4th of January, you will see me there. And then we will go to Chennai for a few days. The devotees there don't even know that. And maybe Amritsar for a few days. And then back to America on the 16th of January. I will arrive in America. That's my basic schedule. And we're going to Beijing and another place in the south. So we're having a good time with the devotees. And we did a program today. It was so interesting. It's a yoga center, but it's the lady who runs the yoga center is Buddhist. So a lot of people practice Buddhism there. So there were like 60 people there. Hold on, someone's knocking. There were like 60 people there, and the program was we teach them how to do kirtan, and then we also did japa, and then talk about kirtan. So I was just telling them that it's our nature to be happy, but we can't do it by acquisition. We have to. The mantra is the most powerful way to connect with your nature, because you already are happy. So we just taking that theme and expanded on that theme for like 45 minutes or so. Then we did kirtan, and then we talked about the kirtan, and then we did japa. And because it was a Buddhist yoga center, it was like everything I said, everybody was like, yeah, of course, exactly. It was amazing. It was amazing. It was like they were already halfway to being devotees. Like some people just were like, they didn't miss one word I said. They were coming up after, and they were just. And the nice thing is our books are printed in Chinese, so now the books are going out. I wrote the book to connect with one of the reasons to connect to people that meet me live, and now I have the book. So now we're connected, even though I go. They're connected through the book, and the book has the website address for the website we don't have that we're supposed to have. So that's another problem that we've been working on forever. So, but anyway, it was amazing. Just like, I went actually crazy. Because I think, we could get a lot of people here chanting japa. So that's something we're going to work on. Anyway, that's it for tonight. We'll see you tomorrow. If you're around, 5:15 p.m. Chinese time, and we'll have a class on dissatisfaction. How to be dissatisfied, no, how not to be dissatisfied, or why we're dissatisfied. Okay, Hare Krishna. Glories to Prabhupada.